Imagine riding on a bus.
For 8 hours.
Overnight.
On a bumpy road.
With lots of yelling in the background.
While trying to sleep.
We did it not once,
but twice.
Tune in and hear the rest of the story.
We didn't have to say that part.
I did
could just
anyways.
go right into the intro.
Okay.
Hello, thanks for joining us again today and Around the World with Joshua and Alyssa. This is week 14 and we are going to start off by telling you more about one of our experiences in Ghana. We've been there the last 3 weeks in our videos, and today we are going to tell you about one of their transportation methods that we got to experience a couple times. And thankfully we don't have to experience this anywhere else because it's not the greatest, but well, you'll see why. So we told you before about this method of transportation, which is like a little tricycle type thing. And so these are mostly used around town. They're basically like taxis, and you just pay a little money and you can go from one place to another in this. Well, there's also another mode of transportation for long distance, like across country.
Because believe it or not, the country of Ghana is pretty large. Because we flew into the capital, but where we wanted to go work at the music camp was like the other end of the country. And it was a long trip to get there. Not just long because it's a long distance, but because the roads aren't really in such great shape.
And there's a lot of speed bumps along the way.
The speed mountains.
So you have to slow down each time you get to that.
Yeah.
It just makes the trip longer.
Yeah.
So it's like an 8-hour trip, something like that. Okay, well now we'll show you what it was.
Now we're getting ourselves out of ourselves.
That trip is taken in these buses. These really big, what do you call them?
I don't know, like a transit bus?
Yeah, something like that.
But it's like a long distance bus, so it's not like your typical... They're pretty nice. I was very impressed with them.
Yes, now they are very much like the buses we have here in the States, except these are nicer. Because the buses here in the States that you take to get from one big city to another, like out on the East Coast, or if you're going across country, you might take a bus sometimes. I've been in a couple of those buses, and they are not very nice. Apparently they get used so much and not kept up well enough that they are not the greatest things to be riding in my experience. Maybe I was just in the wrong ones. But these buses are really nice. And what's nice what's neat about these is they like to decorate. Each bus driver likes to decorate in a different way. So for example, this person, they covered all the seats in United States of America stuff. So you see flags, it looks like there's newspapers, but it's just the seats. That's the decoration they used. A lot of them will have on the front in the windshield that says like Jesus saves, or Jehovah, or whatever message they want to be sending. USA.
Stuff.
Yep. So this is at the bus stop. And this bus stop is nothing fancy. It's not as nice as the bus itself. But look how close all of them are parked next to each other. Like when we walked in between these buses, it was like a single file line.
Very tight.
Yeah. And
they're professionals.
Yeah.
Good job.
And when you get there, you see all these people with snacks and drinks and cell phone chargers, shoes, all sorts of things.
All kinds
sunglasses,
of goods, stuff you might need to bring wherever you're going next.
Yeah, so all these people are there because they know that there's going to be people there with money traveling, and they're trying to make some business. So this is what it looks like when you arrive to go on your bus trip.
It is a busy place.
Yeah, crazy. When you get on the bus, well, I wanted to show you this picture. This is looking out our bus into another, and this little kid has his face squished up against the glass.
Ugh.
So funny. But once you get on, there is air conditioning inside, so it's nicer. And then you all get in your seats, and you have to be there by a certain time or the bus may leave without you. Mm-hmm. But the weird thing is that all the times I've gone, we didn't leave until like an hour later. So we get on the bus, and it's time to leave, and we sit there on the bus, just waiting and waiting and waiting, and then finally we leave.
Yep.
And as you start to drive along, you look outside, and it was funny when we were there this last time when we were leaving to come back to the States, because these little kids outside were looking in the window and they saw us, and we were the only white people in there that they could see, and so they started waving to us, so we waved back to them and they got all excited.
It was really fun.
And some people just stared at us as the bus drove by, and
hi.
It was a lot of fun. But
it's a long trip. So once we got on this bus, we were on it as an overnight bus, which is why we don't really have great pictures of traveling, because we're trying to sleep.
And the seats don't recline that much. No. They do enough, maybe more than an airplane seat. But it's still hard to sleep, especially when you're going over speed mountains and in potholes, and it's not as smooth as an airplane.
No.
But
I think that's probably why it takes so long, is because they're always like going around all these potholes and over speed bumps, and then they'll get to a village and need to slow down too, because there might be people or animals or something like that in the way. And
we stop in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and whatever else.
It's not quite like a rest stop though.
No, it's not.
A little bit more basic, but that you do really need to make sure you get back on the bus on time,
because they
would leave without you.
And the missionaries told us about a time when they missed the bus, because they actually did leave on time. So they hired an Uber driver to catch up with the bus, and it took a while. They finally got there, but it was a crazy trip up until that point.
Yeah.
When you start going, they start playing this nice music, and it's like, oh, this is nice. And then it starts to get dark, and the movies begin. And if you want to know what the movies are like, just go on YouTube and search for Ghana movie, and you'll probably find some of the things they do. And it's basically just people getting in fights and yelling at each other the whole trip. And so you're trying to sleep because it's overnight, and you can't, because you keep hearing this loud yelling, and they don't turn the sound down, and there's not headphones. It's just everybody listens to it, and it's in another language mixed with English, so we don't quite understand it. But there's enough that it's just so hard to sleep unless you're super tired.
It's quite the experience.
Yes. So those are the famous bus trips in Ghana, going from the capital city up north to where we stayed.
Up in Wa.
Yeah. So it was not quite the most restful trip. You do want to take a nap when you're done. But it was a great cultural experience.
It was.
A lot of fun.
Quite the experience.
Yep.
Little taste of Africa.
Yep, so that is the bus ride experience. Now, on to number 4 of Alyssa's missionary story about Mary Slessor.
Can you believe it? We already had 3 lessons. We're almost done with this story.
Be sure you come back next week.
Yeah, and the week after that, because we'll have a new story.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we left off with our story last time. Right at the end, the chief of the village finally followed through on what Mary had asked and built her a house. So she had a house to live in and to do ministry. And then at the end of her story, Mary was starting to get really sick because she'd been doing so much running around and doing so many different ministries and helping out people and trying to stop fights and all of that. And so she decided it was time to go back to Scotland. So she took Janie, the oldest little girl that she rescued, with her back to Scotland. And it was weird because Mary got back to Scotland and she knew the place. She had grown up there, but it didn't feel like home anymore. She didn't dress like everybody else. Her hair was cut short. Her skin was dark from being outside. She was used to walking through the jungle and sleeping in a grass hut, and everywhere they looked, it was streets and carriages and fancy homes. Nothing like life back in Calabar. But Mary was there because she knew she had a mission to do. She was sick. She needed some time for her body to recover, but then she knew God would use this as some way to help out the ministry. So as Mary began to feel better, she began to travel around and share about what God was doing in Calabar. She talked about how people were coming to trust Christ as their Savior, how they weren't fighting anymore, but she always ended with reminding the people that they needed money to help the ministry happen, and they needed more people to go to Calabar to be missionaries. Mary was doing so much work. Who was going to take her place if she ever got too sick to go back? And so Mary shared with so many different people, and God used that to help some people think about wanting to be missionaries and to give money to help the ministries in Calabar. Well, finally, Mary was feeling much better, and she and Janie were so excited they could go back. So they went back and settled into their life back in the villages, and Mary kept traveling around and doing what she always did. Well, Calabar was controlled by Great Britain, and so they always wanted to make sure everything was settled and peaceful. And so the British embassy sent a soldier to come see the village, kind of where Mary was living. And he came to Mary and he said, we've heard that a lot of the fighting has slowed down and the killings aren't quite as much, but we still hear about it, and I think we're going to send some soldiers to help make sure that there's no more fighting, there's no more killing. Mary was so disappointed. She had worked so hard with the people, but if soldiers came in, it would disrupt everything and it'd be like starting all over again, and all the fightings would probably begin. Mary was so disappointed. She told him, I don't think soldiers are a good idea. I think the people just need a little more time. They've gotten better, can't you see? But they just need a little bit more time to keep working on it. And he looked at her, and a big smile spread across his face. He said, Mary, we're going to choose you. You're going to be like a British official, and you will be in charge of this area and these people and helping them work out their disagreements. Wow, that's so cool. God used something that Mary liked to do, helping people work out their problems and showing love to the people of the area, and now they were going to pay her to do it. So now it was her job. She still loved to do it anyways. So a lot of times, just like she'd always done, Mary would go to arguments where she knew there were two chiefs fighting, and she would walk right up to the middle of all the chiefs, and she would sit down in their circle, and she'd pull out her bag of knitting, and she'd begin to knit. She always said she knit because then nobody could see how much her hands were shaking. So she would knit, and she would listen to the men as they would talk things out, or she would ask them questions, help them talk, and explain what was happening so then they wouldn't fight. And little by little, they began to see life was so much better when they weren't fighting with each other and when they could just learn to take time to talk it out. And they knew that she was a good listener. So Mary did her job really well. She got to talk to so many people, and she got to help keep so many of the villages calm and peaceful. And a lot of times, people would come right to her. She would kind of be like the judge of the area. So she would sit on her rocking chair on the front porch so she could rock and listen to what they had to say. She'd put a little shawl over her head, and a lot of times she even had a baby in her arms because she was still taking care of twin babies or other children that people didn't want. So she would listen to their problems, hear them all out, and she would help them talk about it and explain what was going on, and she would help them make peace between their people. And the people really began to respect her even more than they had before. And Mary had such a neat ministry with these people. Well, the people in the villages decided they wanted to move closer to where the river was because that's where most of the trade was happening. So they began to build huts closer and closer to the river, far away from the main village. And many of the people began to move out. Well, because they were closer to the river, that meant they were exposed to more people. And when they were exposed to more people, they got some sicknesses, and they got smallpox, and it got so many of the people sick in the village close by the river. And then those people brought it back to Mary's village. So she ran around helping give medicine and food and water and taking care of people. And then even the chief got sick. And there were so few people able to help that Mary had to do so much of the work by herself, and the chief ended up dying, and Mary had to bury him, and it was so sad for her. These were people she loved and she cared about, and she couldn't help them enough. There wasn't enough of her to go around. Well, after the smallpox went around, she ended up getting sick because she had been working so hard, and so it was time for her to go back to Scotland again for a little rest. But before she went back, she heard something about some people. There was a tribe called the Aros tribe, and nobody wanted to talk to them, just like nobody had wanted to help out the other people groups she had helped. And she began to think and pray for these people. But they were a vicious tribe. They were mean, and they did all sorts of terrible things. But Mary had a special place for them in her heart. So you'll have to come back next week and see what happens when she goes to Scotland, and if she gets to go and help the Aros people.
Okay. Make sure you come back and don't miss the last one next week.
Mm-hmm.
If you have not already seen it, we have something else kind of hiding in view today. And so be looking for it. Right now, we are going to bring on some special guests.
Mm-hmm.
This time, they're live with us. So they're going to come take our place in a moment. And they are named Paul and Jamie Schmidt. And we have Iowa/Brazil because they live in Iowa, but they were supposed to be down in Brazil right now.
Mm-hmm.
And because of things going on in this world, maybe you can figure it out, they are not able to be down there. And so they spent some time with us this week helping us work on our house. So we asked them if they would tell you what they are going to do when they finally do get down to Brazil, hopefully next year. And so some background on what they plan to do and a little bit about what Brazil is like. We'll also cover some more of Brazil in the future when we talk about it because I've been there. But for now, we're going to bring them on. Here is a picture of them, and they look nice. And I will let them come and do their presentation for you, and then we'll come back on to end the show.
Yep. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm. Well, hello.
Oi.
I'm Paul, and this is Jamie. As Joshua and Alyssa said, we are from Iowa. I cannot really tell you a whole lot about Brazil because I've never been there, so Jamie will be the one mostly telling you about what Brazil is like. So yes, originally we were going to be in Brazil because of COVID-19 this year. We were not able to make it down there. As it stands right now, people are still having difficulty getting there and coming back. So yes, we were planning on taking a survey trip to northeast Brazil. We got to know missionaries Jim and Julie Leonard about a year ago, roughly.
I've grown up knowing the Leonards.
Yes, but I met them about a year ago and quickly became good friends with them. And Pastor Jim wanted to talk to me one day about the possibility of coming down for a survey trip. So a survey missions trip is not necessarily one where you go down and like work on a building or have several VBSs. This would be for a couple weeks to northeast Brazil to observe how ministry is done down there. Shall we go to the next slide?
Arrows.
Go ahead.
So here's a picture of Jim and Julie Leonard, and Paul will talk in a little bit here more about what they do down in Brazil, but they serve in northeast Brazil. So they're with the circle. It's circling 3 states of in the country of Brazil: Ceará, Piauí, and Maranhão. And those are 3 states where we will be traveling to when we go down to Brazil next year, seeing kind of what ministry looks like there and what the missionaries do in those 3 states. Jim and Julie Leonard live in Ceará. That's in the top right corner of the country. And that is where they are missionaries at, and they also teach at a Bible college down in Brazil as well. Here are some pictures of Brazil. A lot of times the people travel on motorcycles to get around places, or they walk rather than driving cars. Some people drive cars, but not everyone does. And not all of Brazil is like this, with the pictures of the cactus and the desert look, but in northeast Brazil they don't get as much rain there, and so it is very desert-like. This year they got more rain, but usually they do not get much rain there. Go ahead.
That's still you, or is that me now?
That's you.
Okay. So, we are going down to primarily see the Leonards' current ministries, and possibly even some of the ministries that they're looking forward to in the future, possibly. The plan was originally to see the seminary where Pastor Jim teaches, and then we'd be taking kind of a road trip through some of the other states, specifically Piauí and Maranhão. And there's a missionary in Maranhão that is in the process of planting, I think, 3 or 4 churches.
So starting up some churches for people.
All at the same time. So kind of a lot of crazy stuff going on over there, so he wanted us to see that. And then he also wanted us to see the state of Piauí, where at the time there were no missionaries, at least of our denomination. And so he wanted to show us the potential field there that they also have a burden for.
So he's looking for, or Baptist Mid-Missions and other missionaries are looking for people to come down to the state of Piauí in Brazil to start other churches, start Baptist churches, and to be missionaries there. And also in the picture, just a little fun fact, that greenhouse, actually there's 2 green buildings there on the screen, that is where the Leonards live. It's called the Oasis. Actually not pictured in that picture is another building on the land that's purple, and that's the Leonards' house. But this is where a lot of visiting missionaries come and stay at this place called the Oasis. And so when we go to Brazil, that is where we will be staying when we're not traveling through the other states in Brazil as well. There's also on the bottom picture and the right hand picture pictures of, well, you'll see me actually in one of the pictures. I went down to Brazil back in 2016 with Joshua, and those 2 pictures there are pictures of a school called Paquignanjedu in that city, and that is a church that the Leonards were at the time when I was in Brazil in 2016. That's the church that the Leonards were working with. They've now been able to help the church a lot, and now there's a Brazilian pastor who leads that church there. But we would get to see some of the different ministries of church planting in Brazil. Seminary?
Yes, so as I mentioned before, Pastor Jim teaches in the seminary. I think he has also been involved with at least 7 different church plants in the state of Ceará. And so, that was something we were planning on seeing, something we hope to be able to see next year.
So there's pictures of Julie Leonard teaching. She teaches some of the women's classes. She teaches the women how to bake and cook. And then, as Paul mentioned, Pastor Jim teaches some of the other Bible classes and some of the preaching classes. So also, when we go next summer, hopefully we'll be able to participate in something called Semana de Música Sacra. So what it is, that is Portuguese, Semana de Música Sacra, and translated into English, that's Week of Sacred Music. So the seminary puts this on each year, each summer, and Brazilians from all over the country, a lot of them from northeast Brazil, but really from all over the country, come to the seminary, and in 1 week they prepare an orchestra and a chorale concert. Throughout the week they have different professors and teachers teaching different techniques, different ways to play, whether it be the violin or the guitar, or different singing techniques. We practice a lot. I was able to participate in this back in 2016. Joshua was as well, and we were able to present concerts at the seminary and at 2 different churches over the weekend after practicing for a whole week. and the theme was heaven. So we played a lot of different songs, a lot of them written by Brazilians, talking about the future hope that we have in heaven someday. And you'll see in the top middle picture a picture of me with 4 different meninas, little girls, and I was able to work with them on learning the song God Is So Good on the violin. And they were able to play this song for the concert later on over the weekend as the other kids sang God Is So Good. So yeah, that is our plan for next summer, Lord willing. And
yeah, so I guess you could pray for us that we would not have any more pandemics so that we can actually make it down there, and that God would teach us a lot through our experiences there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is it for this week. Thank you again for joining us. We always like it when you get on and watch. Hopefully, if you like it, you give us a like, share it with somebody else, subscribe so that you see every time we put out our new videos. Hopefully in the future we'll have some more live people here, besides just us.
Special guests.
Yes. So, we will see you again next week, week 15. And until then, have a great week. Eat your snacks. And do everything you're supposed to. Bye.